ETM Hotep, Rennie Sean, welcome in peace. My name is Sean. I'd like to thank everybody tuning into the Mossy Warrior Clan YouTube channel. Please like the show, share the show, tell a friend, tell a friend. We in the building. Alafia to all my West African brothers and sisters out there. Jama and Boka to all my Gambian and Senegalese people out there. What's good? Um, Man, I got some information I want to kind of run down to you, but I'm gonna do it in spurts. Several different sources and then some additional information that I want to kind of get out there to stay on topic with what I got going on. Like I said, I'm not really doing much more of anything else but SARS-CoV-2 and 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 everything else that come down the pipeline is after that, culture, Africa all day, representing the nuances of certain things. You know, that's where I'm rocking. I'm staying right where I'm at with that. Please like the show, share the show, tell a friend, tell a friend. We live. I don't know if well, it's late, so most of y'all ain't even gonna be. Most people ain't even gonna be up. Yeah. So give me a second here. I'm trying to actually share and y'all need to know where y'all at.
You looking at a young black king. Astro project, blast of a tech, pass your neck with the shit to leave a rapper and Rex from the back of a black Acura. Bullet ricocheted and swayed and it passed through your pecs. The assassin wet. All y'all know y'all don't have to go. Sawed off shoddy, make you potty, probably call the law. Me no gangster, I'm no tough, got me child of the most high. I get on the mic and you go, bye bye. Devil don't test me, I throw shrapnel where your chest be. Shooting our family down in the streets. Fuck the police, they ain't marching for me. Pull up, not that Rari, I ain't bad yet. I pull up, out that 85% of mass at. I put this on God, bad black is so hard. Bitch, I'm going back to Harlem in my West African garb.
Yeah, man. So we back now. You know you with the Mossy all day, every day. Shout out to everybody that actually viewed the video that I did yesterday regarding the evolution of culture. There was some serious work into that, and I do realize that a few people was quite into that topic of conversation and the information that was handed down. I believe a few people was telling me that they actually learned some things that they didn't actually know before, and hopefully that inspires people to be more interested in the field of anthropology, as it allows um, everybody to look at things differently, shape their worldviews, and advance the conversation forward like it's supposed to be. Right when Kofi yelled out, "Let's get this culture," that's exactly what he meant. Let's get this culture. It wasn't necessarily about much more than that. It was about African culture, African traditions, African systems. You know what I'm saying? And scrutinizing it and getting down to the nitty gritties and bringing forward how people evolved over time and how culture evolves and how it transitions. So hopefully in some of these steps that I'm actually doing, I'm helping. I told y'all, I hope I'm helping people figure out how science works. I said all 2022 is about demonstration, showing people how things work, how things transpire, right? And in order for those things to get to the point to where they can get to, it's about that growth and development and that methodology and being able to understand, all right, so here's where we are. This is what's going on. Now I can see things clearly now, like the song say. You know what I'm saying? And when it's too much noise, you can't really grab the gist of it. Then we can go back and look at the inner workings of certain African teachings and traditions, and we can dissect them things more scientifically and address the certain things we may have differences with, or the things that we need to stand on. Because ultimately, we always been in the position to where we wanted to advance knowledge. Like when I did the twins, uh, the Yoruba about the twin, the Ijibu presentation, right? Dealing with that. There were some things in there that earlier on we saw that the Yoruba was doing that really wasn't, what we up to par today. But we had to understand where they were in their thought process. And now we know how critical cultural perspective is, and man, and how we just kind of like shortcut stuff and say certain things that just really just get us away from where we need to be as an actual people. You know what I'm saying? You have people saying that most of the time we behind on said subject matters, but nah, we ain't just really behind on said subject matters. We're just not certain people come into information at different times, allowing us to go backwards toward those things that we see, and we have to deal with those things like that. And it just is what it is. So I don't too much buy everything that's being sold. But I do want to get into the nitty gritty and the crevice of the conversation. I see we got a couple people in the building, and that's cool. Not too many people saying anything about anything, so I want to line everything up the way I need to line it up, and then we'll get it going. So again, I'm just gonna breeze through a couple of articles. I'm not gonna give you the full context. Y'all always know I got all the sources of anything that I kick in the description of the video. So I want to bring to you in this particular presentation, right? Uh Hold up. Did I title this just like the other presentation? I mean the other bill? I think I did. I need to change the title. Yeah. So give me a second. Let me not share my screen. Let me do this. YouTube. I need to change the title. Let me do this. Yeah, I want to change the title. Switch profile. Support too. Please hit the like button on the video. All right, I think I got that edited. Yeah, so let's go. Let me get into it. All right, that ain't the same no more. It's part two. So, the origins of human cumulative culture from the foraging niche to collective intelligence. So, in this particular article, it talks about the various studies. Well, it talks about humans and apes. And what we're going to do is we're going to get into a little bit of how the foraging niche is observed, and how they look at things and all of that. So I'm gonna give you the abstract, and then I'm gonna give you a couple of little key points in here that will make sense. And then we're gonna bounce to the next article, and I'm gonna give you a little bit of the abstract and some information in there, and then the other one, and then I got something else lined up because I don't want to be too long in the bill. Since we're talking about since I've been talking about the evolution of culture, and I kind of been on this tangent about um the anthropology, right? The big deal about anthropology, and how biologists use certain things, and how archaeology has its role and its understanding, and why Africa is so important. I just want to get to the crevice. I mean, to the point. So again, various studies have investigated cognitive mechanisms underlying culture in humans and other great apes. However, the adaptive reason for the evolution of uniquely sophisticated cumulative culture in our species remains unclear. We propose that the cultural capabilities of humans are the evolutionary result of a steep-wide transition from the ape-like lifestyle of earlier hominids to the foraging niche still observed in extinct hunter-gatherers. So, recent ethnographic, archaeological, and genetic studies have provided compelling evidence that the components of the foraging niche which is social egalitarianism, sexual and social division of labor, extensive co-residence and cooperation with unrelated individuals, multi-locality, fluid sociality, and high between camp mobility uh, engendered a unique multi-level structure, social structure with the cognitive mechanisms underlying cultural evolution, high fidelity, transmission, innovation, teaching, recombination, ratcheting, evolved as adaptation. So therefore, multi-level socially underlining of the social ratchet of irreversible task specialization, splitting the burden of cultural knowledge across individuals, which may explain why human collective intelligence is uniquely able to produce sophisticated cumulative culture. Now, the forge and niche perspective may explain why a complex gene cultural dual inheritance system evolved uniquely in humans and interprets the cultural, morphological, and genetic origins of Homo sapiens as a process of recombination of innovation appearing in differentiated but interconnected populations. So, the crest of the article was part of a discussion meeting issues with the emergence of collective knowledge and cumulative culture in animals, humans, and machines. So, just a little bit about the background and not the whole thing. Human cumulative culture differs from the culture in other primates that it is more instinctively accumulates over generations without loss, a property described a directional or ratchet effect. Human culture extends across multiple minds and generally cannot be recreated from scratch. While chimpanzees present cultural traditions and instances of teaching, evidence of cultural ratcheting beyond three-part tools is so far absent. By contrast, cultural complexity is early human hominids significantly increased from the earliest stone tools to late Stone Age and Upper Paleolithic kits of complex and diversified multi-part tools. So the grade 8 forging niches and their cultural implications. All right, this is box one and pretty much some things that we're going to highlight out of this 11-page article. Cultural traditions have been identified in chimpanzees and orangutans, and to the lesser extent in baboons and gorillas. Chimpanzees show the richest cultural diversity with social learning and horizontal transmission of tool traditions, vertical transmissions. Remember, yesterday we talked about vertical transmissions, so from mother and father to offspring, along with differentiated matrial lines, basic teachings between mother and infant. See there? And diverse gestural repertoire in dyadic interactions, and even between group cultural transmission. Nonetheless, cultural recombination and ratcheting have not been observed beyond 3 to 5-fold tools or tools used sequences. Limits to high sophistication of cumulative culture in chimpanzees may stem from social features. Related males and unrelated females, like in the polyandrous and male philopatric groups, where males defend larger territories, basically. Now, dominant hierarchies favor more cooperation among males than females or between sexes. Simpler cultural innovations such as moss sponging may be introduced even by juveniles or low rank individuals and spread horizontally, right, peer to peer, by distant observation. However, complex traits requiring close proximity to tolerate demonstrators may be hindered by dominance and antagonism and mostly transmitted between mother and infant, so vertical. Consequently, dominant hierarchies may have a negative effect on cultural exchange between matrial lines. So, chimpanzee fusion dynamics provide some opportunities for temporary associations and cultural exchange between juveniles. However, group encounters outside fission fusion units are often antagonistic. Between group migration is mostly limited to unrelated females transferring for life, but their initial low rank may limit opportunities for cultural exchange. While baboons show more tolerance and affiliated between group interactions, They also exhibit male philopatry and dominance hierarchies with high-ranked females cooperating defensively against males. And according to tool use, is less frequent but still within the chimpanzee range. Thus, while a male chimpanzee may absorb tool use in around 20 distinct adult males over a lifetime, the figure is over 300 for hunter-gatherers. In a summary, although tool use, complex social learning, and learning facilitation between mother and infant probably characterize our last common ancestor with Pan, radical changes in adaptive niche have to occur before higher levels of cultural accumulation were possible in the hominid lineage. So I had to run this down to y'all. Now I can continue with what I left off at earlier. Oops, my bad. Too deep. All right, so I almost messed up. Now I want to go down a little bit, and I know there's some stuff in between here, but I want to talk about the social networking and hunter gatherers. So, new approaches to study the study of mobility and sociality in past and present hunter gatherers include sensor technologies, remote sensors, image analysis, machine learning, isotope tracking, and agent-based simulations, among others. Quantification and mapping of hunter gatherer social networks has revealed details of fluid and multi level sociality. Now, where friendship links connect unrelated mobile households into camps of temporary composition and camps into multi camp structures. Friendships start early in playgroups where toddlers already spend more time with unrelated friends than parents. Mobility across networks promotes constant encounters between friends. Afanil kin and kin members frequently moving between residential camps. Between camp connectivity over long territories buffers against resource unpredictability, seasonality, and environmental depletions. Ethnographic studies demonstrate the longevity of relevance of friendships to hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Among the great anamnese, a visitor would often adopt the host child to seal a lifetime bond between unrelated households from different camps. Non-reciprocal adoptions created networks connecting multiple households and camps, with few children residing with their parents. Long-distance networking is also crucial for foraging cooperation and cultural exchange. For instance, the Kalahari maintain up to 15 friendships, each over up to 100-mile distance, based on reciprocal exchanges of valuable gifts, and resulting in exchange networks with hundreds of individuals, partners in our often different environments and or age groups, ensuring diversity in exchange goods and skills. Around 70% of personal possessions resulted in the exchanges, and most visits to distant Cairo partners had the purpose of exchanging gifts. Now, the Hadzar in Tanzania play the Lukuchuku game. It's a betting for valuable but rare items such as arrowheads, scrap metal, arrow poison, or seeds, thus stimulating travel and spreading of material culture across hundreds of miles. The Bayaka in Central Africa exhibits a system of rituals where spirit guardians demand the sharing of valuable hidden objects, promoting their circulation within and between communities. In summary, traditional ethnographic and new quantitative approaches can provide insights into the creation, adaptive functions, and cultural consequences of social networks and hunter-gatherers, which rank among the most important social adaptations of humans and are associated with increased collective intelligence and complexity. So now we can get into primitive cognition and the origins of human culture. Like I said, I'm not going to give you all of it, but I'm going to give you some of it. All right. So, as Testosis has argued, cross-cultural psychology aims to look for and account for similarities and differences in the behavior of individuals in diverse cultural groups. It links human behavior to its cultural context. There's that word again, cultural context, something that has been missing here for quite some time. Now, Portinga notes that research in cross-cultural psychology focuses upon differences rather than similarities in psychological functioning. Consequently, stereotype views of them versus us are promoted. Furthermore, Keller and Portinga and Schomerick bemoan the fact that the cross-cultural psychological literature pays sparse attention to evolutionary approaches. Evolutionary aspects are rarely mentioned in the cross-cultural literature, despite the fact that they have direct relevance of cultural psychology. A pressing question for anthropologists is what differentiates humans from other primate species? To what degree do non-humans share other capacities still thought to be exclusively human? Answers to these questions have focused on diverse areas, including, but not exclusively, cognition styles of cooperation, tool use, influence of the surrounding environment, and the niche construction. While much progress has been made in defining uniquely human cognitive aspects, much less understanding exists of the evolutionary process and involved in generating these differences. To this extent, Hayes notes that the evolutionary research on human cognition asks what types of cognition makes human unique and how they arise through evolutionary pathways. Laboratory studies of primate cognition are somewhat problematic to the extent that captive populations of species are not always comparable, and it may not be possible to generalize the natural population. Field studies of primitive cognition can pose significant difficulties in that the replications are costly and difficult to conduct, and similar different populations cannot be easily compared. In an attempt to resolve these issues, Tomasello and Call propose the creation of data banks for deposition of primary data and videotapes so as to facilitate cross-examination, replication, and eventually the grouping together of data across investigative groups. So the study of non-human primate culture may provide significant understanding into the development of human culture, since it is likely that evolutionary continuities link human and non-human primate cognitive processes. Thus, examination of chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, can inform us about cognition in the common primate ancestor and determine which human cognitive aspects are shared with other non-human primates and which may have evolved more recently. Evidence exists for both commonalities and major differences here and indicate a more gradual and incremental process of human evolution than previously assumed. So, do primates have culture? Whether primates have culture has been a topic of long-standing debate among biologists and biological anthropologists and rests on the definition of the term culture. As Saline argues, the use and abuse of biology, social scientists have been reluctant to compare humans with animals and to use the term culture for non-human species for fear of threatening human beings in their humanity. In terms of culture, many scholars assert that some animal behaviors are cultural to the extent that they are socially transmitted intergenerationally. They fulfill the widely accepted definition of animal traditions as distinct behavior patterns shared by two or more individuals in a social unit, which persist over time and that new practitioners acquire in part through socially aided learning. Evidence is rapidly accumulating that non-human primates indeed do have culture. This evidence questions the long-standing premise among sociocultural anthropologists that it is only humans who have culture. Not only do chimpanzees as a species demonstrate a wide range of traditions, but significantly, each community possesses its own set of cultural traditions. These cultural traits involve not only feeding patterns, but also exist in the communicative and social domains. Such diversity has been found in various contexts: sexual, social, demographic, tool use, and hunting. Chimpanzees are skilled in tool use, with different groups deploying diverse tools to resolve identical problems. These behavior differences cannot be accounted for genetically. The first indication that non-human primates have culture derives from field work among, you already know, What monkeys those are. In the 50s in Japan. Now, a female monkey of Kashimo Islands was observed rinsing sweet potatoes prior to eating them. Yeah, a monkey rinsing off sweet potatoes prior to eating them. This behavior was subsequently transmitted throughout the troop. Food processors and tool use. I'm going to stop right there because I don't want to get too far away from where I'm about to go. All right, so this article deals in the politics of research in Africa, the quality of anthropo-historical and linguistic data in African studies. I'm just going to give you a little bit about this because this has something to do with, something coming down the line, and then I'm gonna get into we're going to get into some nice. So this article discusses the validity and usage of highly ethnographic historical oral data with reference to some of the literal criticisms by African anthropologists on some of the recent historical and anthropological literatures by Western scholars. Specifically, the article analyzes the Igbo Women's War and the Abo riots. Now, I know you're thinking this is off topic. Yeah, absolutely correct. It is off topic to a degree, but it is talking about, let me finish, the southeastern part of the colonial Nigeria in 1929 through the critical reviews of African anthropologists. This article argues strongly that the reliability and validity of oral traditions transformed into historical text and its usage should be based on two main factors. First, the need for the Western anthropologists or historians to take due account of the translation of language and cultural idioms of the culture of the people in question. And second, rational data control measures such as the triangulation of the oral data with other historical and ethnographic evidence, whether written or unwritten, must be taken during the usage of oral evidence and research of Africa. I'm gonna say that again because I know somebody heard what I just said and like, hold on, say it again. So this article argues strongly that the reliability and the validity of oral traditions transformed into a historical text and its usage should be based on two main factors. The first, the need for Western anthropologists or historians to take due account of the translation of the language and cultural idioms of the culture of the people in question. You heard somebody arguing that earlier on a previous show if you was tuned in, right? That is what T'Challa was getting at. Second, rational data control measures such as triangulation of oral data with oral, historical, and ethnographic evidence, whether written or unwritten, must be taken during the usage of oral evidence in search of Africa. The author uses a multi-source historical and ethnographic literature on the validity and the uses of oral evidence by reputable African anthropologists and historians to critique the validity of misuse of ethnographic evidence or tradition of Africa for the ethnographic research for the reconstruction of Africa history. The lesson from these ethnohistoric documentation is that African anthropologists have discovered some gross mistranslations and misinterpretations of oral traditions in text from these accounts about African culture by Western anthropologists. So I'm sitting this here because this is going to spark something that we'll probably end up getting to down the road, right? So I want to get into this and I want to come back into where I was going.
Biological and cultural aspects of being human. So one of the questions that we need to ask is, where did we get this cultural side of us? Or how did culture evolve? We know that all humans alive today have culture. We all have the same capacity for culture, even though cultures look different from place to place. So where did culture come from in the first place? We might argue that other animals have culture or some elements of culture, but we also have to remember those characteristics that define human culture, as we've discussed before. Culture is learned, culture is shared, culture is dynamic, culture is symbolic, etc. There are a lot of things that go into our definition of human culture. So do we see all of those characteristics in other animals, or do we only see some of them? Even if we do see some of those characteristics of culture in other animals, we can probably still agree that what humans do is much more elaborated than in other species. Humans, we have our phones and clothing and computers and houses and schools. These are all cultural inventions and elements of culture that we just don't see other animals displaying. So in order to understand how it is that humans develop this thing called culture, we need to really understand what it is that separates us from the rest of the animals. We need to compare ourselves to perhaps our closest relatives to see what we have in common and then what is also unique to just humans. So let's start by positioning ourselves in sort of a family tree. This type of diagram is called a cladogram. It's kind of like a taxonomy, but we use it to show evolutionary relationships of plants or animals. Now we can put any group of animals or plants onto a cladogram, but their relative position to one another shows us how closely they are related. So we're talking about essentially these lines. How far apart these lines are give us an indication of how far apart or how related or unrelated two different groups of animals are. So the shorter the lines between groups, the more closely related they are. And where the lines meet up, like this, where those lines meet, that represents some sort of ancestor in the past. Because you'll see here on the y-axis is time. So up at the top, this is today, and then this is in the deep past as we go down. And then side to side, the x-axis is the evolutionary distance, meaning that the further apart two animals are on this diagram, the more evolutionary distance there is between the two. So we'll use this cladogram to represent the living apes. There are 6 main ape groups alive today. There are the gibbons. Gibbons are smaller apes. They live in Indonesia. They only weigh about 10 to 25 pounds, and they live in 1 male, 1 female pairs. So a male and a female will pair up. The females give birth to twins, typically, and then both parents equally take care of the babies together. The next group are orangutans. They also live in Indonesia, but they're much bigger. Males are about twice the size of females, and they live in these very spread out 1 male, multi-female groups. The next ape group are the gorillas. Gorillas live in Central Africa. Males are twice the size of females, and they also live in 1 male, multi-female groups. The next group are the bonobos. Sometimes bonobos are called pygmy chimpanzees because they look a lot like the other chimps that we're used to, but they're a bit smaller. They live in Central Africa, and they live in groups where there are lots of males and lots of females together, although females are typically the ones who have a little bit more power or status. So there's sort of a female hierarchy within the bonobo groups. Next, we have chimpanzees. They also live in Central Africa, and some chimps live in Western Africa. They're larger than bonobos and a bit more aggressive. And then finally, our last ape group are the humans. Yes, the humans, us. We are apes. And so these are our closest living relatives. Humans today live all over the world, but our ancestors originally all came from Africa. So looking at this diagram now, there's a couple important things to notice. Because cladograms show evolutionary relationships, this is showing us which apes are most closely related to one another. And that's, again, represented by the shortest lines between groups. So what we see here is that bonobos and chimpanzees have the shortest distance between the lines, or the shortest lines connecting them. And that's because bonobos and chimps are the most closely related ape groups on this cladogram. They're sort of like sister species. And the point where those two lines meet, that represents a time in which there were no chimps and no bonobos, but there was some other kind of ape, an ancestor group that split into the two groups that became the chimps on one side and the bonobos on the other. After the chimps and bonobos, the next most closely related group is the humans. And that's because the distance between humans and bonobos, or humans and bonobos and chimps, is shorter than the lines connecting bonobos or chimps to any other group. So while these two are sort of sister species, we're like the first cousins. We are equally related to both chimpanzees and bonobos. It's not that we're closer to one or the other, because the lengths of the lines here is the same between humans and chimps and humans and bonobos. So they're sisters, we're first cousins. The next furthest cousin is the gorilla. After that, the orangutans are like second cousins. And then finally the gibbons, who are, the cousins that show up at a family reunion. You know their family, but you're not quite sure who kid they are, but they're technically still part of the group. So these are the 6 living ape groups that are alive today. We can split these apes into 2 smaller subdivisions. The lesser apes, which includes the gibbons and animals like the siamangs. We call them lesser apes because they're a lot smaller. And then we have the greater apes, which is basically everyone else. The orangutans, gorillas, bonobos, chimps, and humans. We have a special name for the great apes, and that is the hominids. Hominids are all of the great apes except for gibbons that are of that larger body size. And in addition, it's not only these living groups, but it's all of the species on the evolutionary line leading to these groups. So what's represented up at the top here are just the living apes. But we know that in the past, other groups existed. And so those groups sort of exist along these lines. We just don't display them. So there might have been some ape group. Well, we know there was some ape group living millions and millions of years ago that was not a gorilla, not a bonobo, not a chimpanzee, not a human, but some sort of ancestor to all of those groups. And so that would be positioned roughly here on the diagram. Okay, so we've got our hominids, and take note that's spelled with an IDS. That's important because there's another word that's very similar to that that's also going to be useful for us. And that is the word hominin. Hominins are everything that's more similar to us than to the rest of the great apes. So this line right here, circled in blue, these are the hominins with an INS. And at the point where the hominin line meets the bonobo and chimp line, we refer to this as our last common ancestor. So this means that at some point in the past, we think it was around 7 million years ago, there was a type of ape living in Africa that wasn't a bonobo, it wasn't a chimp, and it wasn't a human, but it was something similar to all of those groups. And this was sort of a grandfather group that split apart into 2. Part of them started evolving into the ancestor that became bonobos and chimps, and the other part evolved into us, the humans. Okay, so we are the hominins, and as anthropologists, that's what our focus is going to be on here. Over the last approximately 7 million years, there have been many, many hominin species, probably at least 20 different species of hominin. It's possible that this is our last common ancestor with chimpanzees, this group called Sahelanthropus chadensis, and we'll speak more about that in future lectures. But you can see some of the hominin groups that have existed over the past 7 million years. And then here at the very end is Homo sapiens. That's us. So thinking about this long family tree of 7 million years of just hominins, you can see that we're pretty new to the game. Homo sapiens showed up only a couple 100,000 years ago in Africa. So a long evolutionary history, it's just we're the only ones who are alive today. Now, in order to assess this question of how did humans get culture, if we know that what we do is different from what other animals do and different from what other apes do, then we have to sort of imagine that culture is something that has evolved somewhere in that hominin timeline. But before we can assess that, it's important that we compare ourselves to the rest of our primate relatives, because there are some things that we do as humans that seem very special and very important, but they're actually characteristics that we share with the other primates. So humans share features, 3 really important features with most other primates. These include increased manual dexterity, increase in memory capabilities, and altricial young. We'll go through these one by one. So the first, most primates, including humans, have increased manual dexterity, which just means we have really nice fancy hands that we can do a lot of stuff with. We can hold pens and pencils, we can type on our smartphones, we can braid hair, or we can pick little fleas and gnats out of our friend's fur. And if you look at all of these different primate hands, you'll see they've got these nice big thumbs. These are called opposable thumbs because that means that you can take your thumb and touch it to the tip of each of your other fingers. Some people think that opposable thumbs are unique to humans, but they are not. Almost all primates have opposable thumbs, and that's because very, very early on in our primate evolution, back even before there were apes, so we're talking 60 million years ago, our earliest primate ancestors all lived in trees. And having these thumbs that could basically wrap around things and grip things were useful for our little primate ancestors while they were clinging on to tree branches. So our hands definitely have made an impact on our ability to do cultural things. We can make a lot of stuff with our great hands, but it's not unique to just us. The next characteristic is that all primates, and especially humans, have increased memory capabilities. We're really good at remembering stuff, and that's because our brains are really big. And this goes for all primates. Our brains are big relative to our body size. And in particular, this part of the brain called the neocortex is really expanded in humans and other primate brains for their body size. But other primates and apes and then humans have very big brains for our body size. And the neocortex in particular is important because the neocortex is associated with memory and especially with social memory. And so a few years ago, some anthropologists did some looking at sort of these brain size ratios, and they looked at that compared to group size, the number of individuals that all live together in a community or in a society. And what they found is the larger the neocortex relative to body size, the larger the group that these animals formed. Because if you're going to live in a society, if you're going to live in a group of other animals, you have to be able to remember interactions with them on a daily basis. You know, if you're a little monkey and you have a piece of fruit that you want to share with a friend, you want to make sure that you are giving it to the monkey that gave fruit to you yesterday and not the monkey that pushed you out of a tree. But you have to be able to remember those individual interactions. The bigger our brains get, the bigger the social groups that we can live in. And living in large social groups is really good for primates. It keeps everyone healthier and safer and, well supplied with food. So it seems as though within our primate evolutionary history, there has been a selection, there's been an advantage for having larger groups, which means that our brains have gotten bigger to support those larger group sizes. The third characteristic that is common to all primates is that we have altricial young. That means that our babies are born sort of helpless. And this is true of all primates. When our babies are born, they can't do anything for themselves. So parents have to feed their babies. They have to carry their babies. They have to protect their babies. They have to keep their babies warm and safe and away from predators or any other danger. If you compare this to animals like goats or horses or deer, those types of animals have what we call precocious young, meaning that as soon as they're born, they can at least, start walking around. They can transport themselves from one place to another. They can get food more or less on their own in that, they can take themselves to their mothers for milk. They can be a part of their own survival. But with primates, that's not the case. And it's because of our big brains. Big brains require a lot of calories to develop. And so when primate females are pregnant, a lot of the calories that they're taking in are put directly into building up their babies' brains. But we all have to essentially give birth to babies before their brains are fully developed. We have to give birth to babies before they're old enough, before they're developed enough to be able to protect themselves or look out for themselves or feed themselves. If you think about a human child, how old would a child have to be to fully take care of itself? I mean, even if you're talking about just basics, that's like a 5-year-old child. There's no way a human could give birth to a 5-year-old child because that brain is just way too big. So what we do is we essentially push out our babies when they're not really ready to come out, before their brains are fully formed. We push them out early because otherwise it would just kill us, the whole process of being pregnant that long and trying to give birth. And then we take care of them during those first few years of life so that their brains continue growing outside of their mother's womb. So we invest a lot in our children, but that's also okay because it's during that early childhood investment that enculturation happens. And enculturation, as you remember, is the process where a child learns his or her culture. And in primates, they also go through a sort of enculturation period where they learn how to become monkeys or apes or whatever it is. So we have a similar sort of childhood process when it comes to baby primates and baby humans. Now, there are a lot of things, though, that humans do that are very different from what other primates do or other apes. So some of the things that make us unique, we cooperate and we share much more than other primates. In this picture here, this is an Amish barn raising. This is when a community of people will come together and essentially build this gigantic barn in the course of a day or 2 days. We're seeing dozens of people all working together toward a common goal. And while other primates do work together, they hunt together, they don't cooperate and share to the same degree as humans. Human women also live past the age of reproduction. So women go through something called menopause, and we don't see menopause in other primates. Menopause is essentially when a woman can no longer have children. She's no longer having a monthly cycle, but she's still alive, and women will live for many decades after menopause when they can no longer have their own children. In primates, we see that they are able to reproduce basically up until the point when they die. Or another way of thinking of that is that primates will die as soon as they are no longer able to reproduce. So it forces us to ask the question, what is so important about life after reproduction or what is so important about human women, perhaps, that keeps us alive even when we can't have babies anymore? Thinking from a purely biological perspective, what every creature needs to do to maintain its species is to have babies. So if you can't have babies anymore, what's the point of being around? Well, the cool thing about humans, because we're so smart, because we've got these big brains, we're great at learning and we're great at sharing, there seems to be a really big advantage in having older individuals in a group who are not actively producing children, but are still able to invest in children. So what we're talking about is grandmothers. There's an advantage to the entire group. There's an advantage to children when grandmothers can invest in their children's children. It makes people healthier. It makes people more successful. And it's one of the ways that our species has evolved. That's pretty cool. All right, another thing that humans do that's different from other primates, we have concealed ovulation, which means that when human women are ovulating, which is the time when it's possible for a human woman to get pregnant, that ovulation is not obvious to everyone else. So maybe it's easier to think of this in terms of other primates. When other primates are ready to get pregnant, the females essentially advertise that information to the group. And they'll do that in a number of ways. But here we see a picture of a chimpanzee, and she has a genital swelling. So this is just her genitals that have sort of filled up with almost water as a way of signaling to the males in the group, now's the time that I need to get pregnant, right? If I'm going to get pregnant, it's got to be right now. So this is a signal to all the males around her. Human women don't do this, though. We don't have these physical symbols or physical signals that we display to let the men know when it's time for us to get pregnant. So why is it that humans conceal their ovulation and primates advertise it? It might have to do with something called mate choice or partner choice. These, primates that advertise their ovulation cycle, they probably don't have a great deal of choice when it comes to who they're going to reproduce with, because any of the males in the group will see this and will make a beeline for this lady. But in humans, because we're able to hide when we are ovulating, it means that we are able to choose who is going to be the father of our children rather than just the biggest guy is the one who's the most successful. Humans also have more elaborate kinship systems. So we recognize not only our mothers, but we also recognize our fathers and our siblings, and we recognize cousins and aunts and uncles and step parents and half brothers and godparents. And we don't see that type of family relationship in primate groups. Primates know who their mothers are. Sometimes they know who their siblings are. Sometimes they know who their fathers are, but that's not always very obvious. So we do family in much bigger ways than other primates. And of course, humans get married. We form these social bonds or social contracts with other people as a way of bringing groups together, as a way of building those large families. And we don't see something like that in primates. Even when primates tend to pair up, they don't have this sort of symbolic or formalized institution for establishing those connections. So while there are a lot of things that we share with primates, there's also a lot of stuff that we do that's unique to humans and we don't see in any other group. Now, if we look at chimpanzees and bonobos, who are among our closest living relatives, or who are our closest living relatives, we see that their behavior has a lot of cultural elements. So many chimpanzee groups make and use tools. They crack nuts open with stones, which you can see represented in the top right corner here. They do a practice called termite fishing, where they take small twigs or pieces of grass and they use it to fish bugs or termites or ants out of the ground to eat them. They also build nests in trees, and they'll sometimes build a new nest every night, depending on where they are, but they'll construct these nests or beds to sleep in and keep themselves safe. Chimpanzees also regularly hunt and share meat with one another. So every once in a while, a group of male chimpanzees will go out and they will hunt down little monkeys. They love eating monkey meat, which is what you see in the bottom right-hand corner. This is a behavior that wasn't known about in the early days of chimp studies, but now we know that it's a pretty common practice, and that's definitely their preferred food. Now, when it comes to bonobos, bonobos have a very unique behavioral adaptation that we don't see in other primates. When chimps, when you're looking at a chimpanzee group, sometimes there might be some aggression between individuals. Let's say two chimpanzees are fighting over a piece of monkey meat, or they both want the same piece of fruit, whatever it is. When chimpanzees start to have an altercation, that can end in violence, and that violence can be really extreme. One person or both, or one chimpanzee or both, could become really extremely injured. They might even die as a result of that aggression, but that's not how it works in bonobo groups. Bonobos have gone sort of the opposite direction with how they handle conflict. Rather than fighting, let's say two bonobos both want the same piece of fruit. Rather than getting angry about it, rather than becoming violent, those two bonobos will settle the disagreement by just having sex. So rather than putting anyone at risk, those two bonobos will quickly have sex and then walk away from the encounter. The tension is released, everyone is relaxed, everyone is happy. I don't know who actually gets the fruit at that point, but it doesn't seem to matter. They regularly use sex as a way of avoiding aggression and violence. And they do this often in male-male pairs and female-female pairs, where it's more sort of like external touching. Or if it's a female who's upset with someone else's younger child, then the female and the mother of that bonobo individual, they will have sex to resolve tension. So the thing that's interesting about these bonobos is that they are the only other primate beside humans to use sex for something other than reproduction. In all other primate groups, we see that sex only happens for reproduction, but both humans and bonobos use sex for other reasons. So you can see some elements of similarity with both chimpanzees and with bonobos when it comes to human behavior. Now, I've included links to various videos on chimpanzee culture. Take a look at those. They'll also be linked in Blackboard underneath this video. But it's from this point that we can start thinking about where humans have really diverged from the ape groups, by thinking about the things that we have in common with our relatives: manual dexterity, increased memory in altricial young, the things that we do that's different, And then also seeing where some of our closer relatives have some starts and bits and pieces of culture. From here, we can move forward to address when it is exactly that our lineage, the hominins, developed this thing.
All right, so this bring me back to I don't want to get into that part yet. There's gonna be too much Chavis gonna be trying to steal. So I want to go back to Article 1 and I want to come down to a little bit about and speak a little bit about from foraging niche to human cumulative culture. Where do I want to get back into the monkeys? All right. Look, I'm gonna give it down. So let me just break this down real quick. I'm gonna get into this paragraph and I'm gonna wrap up. But so the breakdown of social hierarchy increases validity of culture transmission. So here they proposed the reduction in social hierarchies was a central factor behind the increased efficiency of culture transmission in humans. In chimpanzees and other non-human primates with dominant hierarchies, reduced social tolerance decreases close physical proximity and opportunities for direct and extended observation of complex cultural behaviors performed by role models. Subordinate individuals are also less likely to express learned behaviors or be copied when dominants are present. The result in reliance of low fidelity transmission mechanisms such as emulation or reverse engineering. For example, chimpanzees and baboons acquire moss sponging skills by reusing discarded sponges without close contact with skilled users. Reliance on low validity of transmission does not seem to result from lack of ability to imitate or copy actions. For example, while juvenile chimpanzees imitate infant carrying behavior using rock dolls, facilitated by tolerant mothers allowing for the close range observation. We conclude that the social hierarchies rather than intrinsic cognitive limitations are the main reason why chimpanzees rely mainly on low fidelity mechanisms of culture transmission. We can then therefore argue that the reason for increased opportunities for much precise copying in hunter-gatherers is the egalitarianism and the social tolerance, increased proximity, and the available time for direct observation of cultural role models differing by age, sex, and family. For example, hunter-gatherer children interact freely with unrelated individuals from different age groups and spend the most time in playgroups, where they imitate each other and practice adult skills by hunting small animals, producing toy tools, or simulating rituals based on extended observations of adults. In addition, the density of households and camps and co-sleeping of various family members within the household reduces physical proximity and enhances social learning. In summary, reduced hierarchies in hunter-gatherers facilitate close range interactions between learners and role models, providing a social context more favorable to high fidelity cultural transmission. So, when we're talking about the evolution of culture, right, we're looking at and why, first of all. So, you're looking at evolution because you're looking at how our closest ancestors behaved. And we're trying to get an idea of where these behavior mechanisms stem and come from, and how they share a culture and we share a culture of creating certain things to help us advance based on our worldview and understanding of who we are and them understanding of who they are in this world together. And what we find is that it's just like the I want to say the chimpanzees who throw stones at trees as a ritual, right? If you're unfamiliar with that, there is something that you can look up. And I know a lot of y'all like to use Google and quick searches to try to correct or find something that you want to get on with. Look that up. Look it up. Chimpanzees or maybe monkeys, but they have a ritual where they will throw stones at, hold on, let me see. Let me see if I can help you out. I got the article somewhere, but I just don't feel like looking for it. I want to see if it's on YouTube. You see a rock? When they began to get right up in there, then the rock came and bounced up off the tree. They don't keep doing it. Watch. But there's an article that actually does a better job at explaining this. And I can't speed this up more. Look, watch. And they do this. This is why all those stones are right there. They pick a stone up and hit it up against the tree. It's for real, it's an actual ritual. I think I might have made us miss this one. No, I didn't. They sit here observing the behavior. You seen them climb up, throw the rock, dip out. They sit here and observe this behavior, man, like it ain't nothing. And it's through like stuff like this, man, where they just kind of understand where they at with it. Like they got rituals too, man. No lie. We missed this one doing it. Look. Toss it on in there. And then he out. He ain't throw it hard like the other people. But now I'm finna take it. Let me see if I can pull it up. Here's an article right here. Chimps may be performing rituals at shrine trees. So they look at things like anthropologists look at things like this for behaviors because they assume that they're picking these behaviors up. Like you can find this stuff. It's not uncommon. So when you're getting into understanding culture, which is the key element here, whether human or non-human, we're going to get impressions of how people behaved prior to where we are today. It's the evolutionary process and understanding who we are, where we come from, and how we evolved into who we are today. I don't think that y'all could actually see this pretty good, but this is for all you evolutionary people out there in the world. This right here. Dealing with them stone tools and all that right here. Homo sapiens, all that. This is good. So look, I dropped this off in the chat for y'all as well, man. I don't want to kind of like bore people in my fascination with actual, not only just human evolution, but the importance of culture, because ultimately that's where I'm going with this all day long, is that the origins of human culture is the significance. You can't talk about studying hominids and early man and not get into understanding the material culture, period. And where do these anthropologists go to do this studying? They go on the continent of Africa. So before we dismiss all these other things that people want to throw around, you have to deal with what's going on. Like yesterday's bill was proof positive that people thought one way and didn't know what I was doing until I hit them with that, and they thought a sister was telling them all these things about Africa, but it wasn't a sister. It was a European. So maybe people were listening. But I don't want to hold nobody up, man. I will be back with more on this particular discussion, especially as it involves culture and the significance of culture to us as a people, and even our closest relatives, which are the non-human primates. And we just gonna get into all of that. So if anybody want to review this work and have more of a collaborative discussion on it, I suggest you do so. In the description of this particular video, I gave you access to all the sources, and we can get into that. You know, I've already dived into it. This one right here, though, I'm leaving this one for a further discussion, because at one point, as long as we stay on where we are, we're going to come into a more modern conversation that's going to lead us into the intricate piece of this. And this is dealing with a Western worldview and their understanding of African culture and how they miss certain things. So appreciate y'all tuning in. I wanted to hit y'all with a little light hour. I know I think Ujawa and them is live. Yeah, they live right now. So you know, I'm gonna drop the link to that.
Real people like would actually.
I had to hit mute real quick. Emmy in the building doing her yap. So I see you over there too. Zion everywhere, man. He back and forth. But let me drop this little link for those of y'all who are interested in all of that. You can go join that conversation. It's that one in the chat. I used to watch Jane Goodell Study Chimp. Yeah. So you want to continue to just do what you need to do, but the link to he says, hold up. I mean, is that one in the chat, that article? Yeah, every article that I had on the screen is in the description of the video. The one that talks about the tools and yeah, I know you're looking at that. But yeah, that's the origins of human communicative culture, from the foraging niche to collective intelligence. That link is in the chat. That link is in there. Everything that I showed today is in there. Even the video is in the description. Even the one that I said I'm gonna come back to in the future, I put that in the description as well. So, because I brought it up. But everything is there for people to actually get a hold to. But man, listen, go bombard Wujawu them right now, man. I appreciate everybody tuning in. I'm just trying to further the discussion and continue to build on the knowledge that we got going. I mean, I did see a bunch of people are starting to get involved in watching the video. Hopefully you watched it and learned something yesterday. If you didn't learn something yesterday, I hope you learned something today. And I'm going to stay right where I'm at in my lane, minding my business, and I'm ignoring all the noise.
Carter on the beat.